future for the ability of nutritional health products to compensate for the loss of antibiotics in farm practice, given the fact we must assume that the use of antibiotics at all levels of farm food production will be increasingly limited by regulation and by consumer preference. Given that background, what is the future for the ability of these nutritional health products to compensate for the loss of antibiotics? And let's start this time, if I may, with Mark Guillemot of Biomin. Mark, please.
Given the increasing awareness, public awareness for the resistance of antibiotics, we see that the feed additive can play a big role on this subject. If we look at where we are now, we see that substitution or replacement product like prebiotics, probiotics, organic acids, phytogenics are gaining momentum, and we see that there is a wider acceptance in the industry to use this product. This being said, I think there are a few factors that should not be omitted. First, I think we have to be realistic in terms of timing. Yeah? There is definitely some potential, but if we look at what's currently ongoing in Asia, in Thailand, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, we have to make sure that the market is ready. Otherwise, this would lead to massive disruption. So this is, I think, one of the elements that need to be taken into account. The next one as well is that we have to manage the expectation. When I say manage the expectation, is especially in terms of the future model of success. And because it's clear to all of us, I guess, that there is not one-for-one solution to replace the antibiotics. And as such, we, as an industry, we need to look for a kind of 360 approach strategy, combining proper nutrition, genetics, health and farm management, and biosecurity. And finally, as well, we have to keep in mind that the regulatory are evolving in the region, and as well that taken only the example of Asia, we are not yet in a harmonized system that will help us as well to give the right setting for the future. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Aunt Matabor, can I turn to you next, please, with this question? The future, the ability of nutritional health products to compensate for the loss of antibiotics in farm practice. How do you view the potential ability, please?
Well, I think especially the feed additive industry is working very hard to come up with new solutions there to help reduce the use of AGPs. Are we there today? No. We're learning hard. Again, it's the science that is being developed in the industry to really understand what is the ability through nutrition to stimulate the immune system and to improve the resistance of the animals. We will also need to work on other elements like good housekeeping in the farms, biosecurity, all those kind of elements will enable us in the future to really make much more progress in that field. There's also limitations. For example, today the regulatory regulations don't allow us to make certain claims on our additives on improvement on the feed performance. That basically hampers us as well on how far we can go as feed additive suppliers. So also from that perspective, changes will need to come into the industry that will enable us to bring further solutions into the market there.
Thank you. Stephen Crisp from BASF. Stephen, can these nutritional health products compensate for the loss of antibiotics?
Thank you, Peter. It's been done in Europe since 2006. We've succeeded in producing antibiotic-free products. I think countries like Thailand, for example, also because of the huge exports into Europe, have managed it. There's still a lot of work to be done. As my colleagues mentioned earlier, it'll be a question. There's no silver bullet to solve the problem. It'll be a number of factors. It'll be all the products we mentioned earlier, as well as good farm management practices. Antibiotics in feed work very well. It's a very cheap alternative to produce feed, but the truth is that they will be banned. I heard that in Indonesia in 2018 is the next country that will ban them. So this is a truth we have to deal with. It's not impossible to produce feed with protein without antibiotics, but it takes a lot of input in terms of good quality feed, good feed additives, and good farm management. Of course, it's of interest to our company because we're a major producer of organic acids. So that, of course, is of interest to us, and we're doing a lot of work on antibiotic growth replacement. We've just started a study in South China Agricultural University where we've sponsored a PhD program to study all the alternatives and combinations of products so that we can advise our customers on the best ways to produce antibiotic-free protein. Thank you.
Thank you. Francois Pellet, may I please turn to you? The ability of nutritional health products to compensate for the loss of antibiotics.
So if we consider first AGP, probably that feed additives today are able to compensate for the loss. We have to keep in mind that the efficacy or impact of AGP has gradually reduced over time. There's many studies showing that probably 20, 25 years ago, AGP were able to improve performance by 5 or 6%. And today, it seems that AGP can improve performance only 1 or 2%, probably because genetics better, maybe some resistance to AGP also are built. So the gap with and without AGP is probably quite small, and I'm sure that with feed additive, we can today compensate this. The difficulty will be to replace the prophylactic use of antibiotics. Today, there's a massive use of antibiotics to prevent disease in the feed. And speaking with many customers in different countries, you see, for example, use of colistin as a routine in a piglet feed, in grower feed, or even in chicken, 100 ppm, 40 ppm. So massive use of colistin, for example. So how will we remove that? And this is much more of a challenge. And if we want to successfully help our customers to get these antibiotics out of the feed, then we need a much more holistic approach. And for sure, as someone said, there's not a silver bullet. We'll need a combination of different additive, I suppose, having different mode of action. But also, as already mentioned, the farm management will be key. So how can we contribute also to the training of the farmers and education of the farmers? And when you see these big corporate farms, when you see the workers, these are mostly migrant workers, very low-skilled workers. So there's a massive effort to do also to train these workers to manage ventilation, the heat, all the farm management practices have to be upgraded. I think we should not also underestimate the quality of the old chicks. Again, today we are compensating sometimes the poor quality of the old chicks by antibiotics. Tomorrow we should have a different practice. So how do we feed the breeders differently in order to have a better quality the old chicks or piglets? So this will be a holistic approach, and feed additive players have a big role to play, starting from knowledge of raw material, how to formulate the feed, what are the right feed additive to use. So this is a very exciting challenge, but I think as an industry, we can really contribute to this target.
Thank you. Dr. Alfred Petri from Evenik, could you give us your perspective on this?
Yeah, there have already been a lot of good and absolutely right thoughts on this, conveyed by the colleagues. Yes, in principle, it will be possible, no? And we have good examples, as you mentioned, in the European markets where we gradually reduced antibiotics in animal production use over the last 2 decades. It started already in the 90s, with a lot of pressure coming from the retail companies to first reduce AGP, and now we are on the way to reduce the therapeutic use of antibiotics, which is for sure a very valid point, that this is two aspects we have to look at, not only the AGPs in feed. The thing is, if we really want to be successful with those alternatives, we need to explore more the mode of action with which these different types of substitutional products work. That is probably nowadays still a kind of problem, because we are not really at that point where we know everything about what our products do. As we are sitting here, we all stand for different types of products, and the better we know and understand what kind of mode of action we provide to the animal, then the more we can predict the value of that product, and that is basically where we are targeting at, to make it as precise as possible in the way of prediction, and then people will no longer look back to the time when they had that kind of broadband effect of antibiotics, which just killed everything. No?
Thank you. Mike Goebel from Diamond V, could you please give us your opinion on this?
Yes, thank you. As I look at it, I think the focus is more on the judicious use of antibiotics. I think that as we talk about antibiotics being used currently in many parts of the world for AGP as well as therapeutic uses, I see that going away as we move forward, and that's where I believe the role of nutritional health technologies can play a significant role. But I do also believe that antibiotics will continue to play a role in the treatment of diseases where it's really about animal welfare and the economic loss. But nutritional products will be able to help, nutritional health products will be able to help with that by stimulating that immune system, working with improving the health of the animal, so the animal itself then can actually help itself through some of those stress and disease situations, so that antibiotics will be able to be used less. But I do believe that both will play a role as we look at the future. So as we look at nutritional health products and how they can play that role, I think that's going to be a key factor as we move forward. And I believe one of my colleagues mentioned earlier, one of the things that's going to limit the ability and the speed in which we can make that happen are those regulations. Regulations to be able to deliver, communicate, and implement those nutritional health technologies that can add that value globally and systematically. So I think that there's a real challenge there that we've got to be able to overcome as an industry, to be able to utilize those nutritional health products the way in which they can help reduce the use, the judicious use of antibiotics in the marketplace.
Thank you.